Hope all of you had a good lunch, and the post-lunch session is always challenging. So hopefully we'll have a great discussion here with this esteemed panel, and hopefully you'll get to learn some new things. So it's the discussion is around talent, and that is something that has kept most leaders both up at night as well as excited. So without further ado, we'll just sort of jump into it. I mean, we have a great set of panelists here from a broad range of industries. So to kick us off, let's just baseline on talent. What does it mean to be a critical talent? Is it the role? Is it the person? Is it a mix of both? Right? And how do you find these people? How do you nurture them? How do you retain them? So, Sudarshan, maybe you can kick us off on that. How do you think about critical talent?
Yeah. So, in terms of talent, I think the key thing is it's not about what you know, but whether you're willing to learn. Because data as a space is moving so fast that even when we hire people from IITs, we tell them it doesn't matter where you're from. So it's about the ability to learn. And regardless of career stage and roles that we talk about, even for executives, one of the things that I look for is what I call as open-minded experimentation. If it's a senior executive, I see that they tend to bet all their money or projects on one idea, and if that fails, they give up, right? But data science, especially, is a area where I think it's all about trying hypothesis testing, and that's what I look for from a talent: learning and ability to experiment, take risks.
Cool, cool. RB, your
So
thoughts on this?
pretty much agree with what he's saying, but a couple of things which maybe from the criticality standpoint I wanted to add. One is how much the person knows the business, right? And maybe analytics is one, performance is one, but how do they connect all the dots across the business, solve the business problems, and see how they can go beyond what we have to deliver? I think meeting the expectation is very simple, but how many things can we actually come up with for the business from the analytics standpoint, which can add a lot of value? So that's one thing which we look for criticality. And usually all the analysts here would know how some of the equations work, but we also have a typical thing which actually says there are a lot of parameters which you have to look at, and we rate people on those parameters. And now we come up with a score which says criticality of the person. But one thing which actually is a bit qualitative, cannot be measured, but sometimes we put a score on this. We say this is something which we need. Mostly the business context, how the business works, how do we make money, and how do we contribute. So that's something which adds to the criticality for us.
Okay, yeah, I think great point around of course the tech side, but the connecting the dots and tying it to business. Saurabh, you're on the manufacturing side. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think agree with the points made, right? And I'll just add to it and bring some flavor of what we see in my industry or in our industry. I think the context is very important, right? When you say great talent for data science, it's very subjective, right? And mind it, it's not great talent for data science. It's great talent for delivering value using data science, right? And the value will come only if the right kind of skill sets are plugged in where the gaps are. So, right, for example, take example of TVS, right? 4 years back, 4.5 years back, the data science team was set up. We realized that if you get the best coders in the world, you get the best data science in the world, right? You get the best models in the world. Will you go and be able to tell your CEO that I derive certain value from these models? No, you will not, unless you have the right context where somebody is able to integrate output of your model. First of all, help you build the right model, and then integrate the output of the model in the daily work management, right? Depending on what tools, what workflows are being used, what apps are being used, right? The results need to be contextualized and embedded in the systems where actually people who are the doers, right? People who actually do stuff, because data science I see as a great enabler, but this has to be plugged in the right way. Therefore, getting those integrators, we call them citizen data scientists, right? We pulled a lot of people who had knack for data. We called them citizen data scientists. We married them with our core data science guys, And that's how, one way to get good talent and get output from data science.
Yeah, so, great point there, right? So connecting the dots and then these integrators, right? So we're sort of on the similar theme. Sugna, how do you think about critical talent?
Yes, from insurance industry. So traditionally, all the decision making, right, so the business was heavily driven by actuaries. So the business knowledge resides with a very small pool. So to give some numbers, so India has just about close to 500 qualified actuaries. And now, post-COVID with the insurance awareness and also the availability of unstructured data, IoT data, satellite images, etc. So then the need for crunching, and there are more use cases around it. So it's very difficult to, for getting a qualified actuary, it's about 6 to 7 year long journey. And I don't think many people have the patience to pursue that career. So it would be more of citizen actuaries or, hybrid data scientists that we need, people who understand both the traditional complex distributions which are used in insurance, along with who can apply sophisticated ML kind of techniques. So that's something that would be required.
Yeah, so thanks for that. So, the theme sort of continues to emerge, right? We're in a, data and analytics kind of conference, but, what is bubbling up is, domain, business problem, systems thinking, integration, learning mindset. Raghav, you're in the business of, building talent. How do you see this
Sure.
play
I
out?
think there are two things that we tend to focus most on. First is the hunger. Do they have gratitude for where they're coming? And that's why IITs are something where we don't hire from. Again, it's just a thought that I have, because people from these tier 2, tier 3 towns, they would be grateful that they're working in an organization like yours. They would not think about what is the next offer they're getting. They would just be plain grateful that they could sit next to you, next to your cubicle. So hunger is very critical to us, because the world that we live in, the technology that is moving, there are two aspects to it. It is extremely dynamic and it is easy. It's not that tough. So if the person has the hunger, the right intent, especially at an early stage of their career, a lot of things can happen. The second aspect is logic, as RB mentioned, right? The context part of it. And some people have it, some people don't have it. And that's where we tend to look at their upbringing, their schooling, whatever they've been doing in the last 22, 23, 24 years. And that's where we understand whether logic is there or not.
Yeah, so, sort of on the bigger sort of soft skills mindset part of it, right? So sort of coming back to you, Sudarshan, maybe share some of, your best practices, in your team or in your career. What do you look for, in an interview, right? Or once they are onboarded, are there any, tricks that you use to get them, scaled up quickly and to retain them? Yeah, just share some of the secret sauce that you can divulge here.
Yeah. If it were there is a secret sauce, I wouldn't tell anyone. But the key thing is, I think, this how do you connect the juniors, right, to be able to deliver and be productive? One of the things is around mentorship. And traditionally, mentorship and training has been top down. We have a mentorship program, and this is how it is. You have to log hours against this, right? We have tried something else different, bottom up. It's called mentor on demand, right? You ask for a mentor, you find who that is, and we'll map them to you and help you. It's more of an enablement platform. That's something that has worked out quite well for us, especially folks like, for example, in the diversity and getting women into the workforce. A lot of them, we know that they are outside the corporate workplace, they have a gap in skill sets. So without that sponsorship and mentorship, they are not going to be able to make it or come up to speed fast enough. They'll always be lagging behind. So these are mentorship on demand, I would say, is a key different thing that we do in our organization.
Yeah, RB?
So a couple of things. One, I think the brand, the city brand is good to attract. And to a large extent, I think I see a lot of people coming in without a lot of knowledge on banking. So that is not required when they come in. But we have a good rotation program where they actually rotate over different businesses and functions. And over a period of time, they might actually find the right spot where they exactly feel that this is what I want to do. So that's something which we do regularly. We have a program called Amplify. Amplify is nothing to do with Analytics India magazine, but it's my team, which is called Analytics and Information Management. So we actually run a monthly event where we actually talk to our people and say, okay, this is what we do in our bank. These are the types of work we do. We pick one of the functions and talk about how exactly the functions work. So a lot of people actually, if they want to actually look at that and see whether they want to come and work with us, they can do that. I think the rotation program helps. It's not just the banking which we look for, the experience in banking which we look for. We are also looking at people who can come in from different backgrounds. So maybe from e-commerce or any other industry which can help. So which I think most of the people we look for are a bit quantitative in nature. So I think we have a wonderful program which actually talks about how you can upskill yourself over a period of time. From the career standpoint, we look at if they can move into the business over a period of time, because doing just analytics in a very far location, not connected to the business, over a period of time might become a bit boring. So we have a lot of opportunities for our people to move into the regions, work with the business and build their career. So that's something which we do regularly. I think we are becoming like a global talent pool for Citi across the regions. So these are some of the best practices which we use. We have a innovation program where people actually go beyond and explore things and see what else can be done and how they can actually contribute a lot of value to the business. So this program actually works very well because it has a sandbox sort of an environment where they can explore a lot of things, not just the tools, but different types of data which can add value. So that actually retains a lot of people for us. So these are some of the best practices which we actually do at Citi.
Yeah, so, great points. In fact, I personally also am a big fan of the rotation piece, right? And I have, been part of those and sort of, truly believe it's a very, very valuable tool to sort of move people around, let them see the business, from different perspectives. And I think it's not only for, big companies, but I think strongly recommend for even mid-size and sort of small companies. Sort of your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just thinking that how would we make rotation work for our teams, right? But in our kind of setup, that's slightly difficult, right? Because we are in the business of mobility, and although you said manufacturing few times, but essentially the way we look at ourselves is a mobility company, right? And the group that I work with is essentially responsible for sales growth, right? And therefore, the data science solutions that we build are essentially to drive market share. Now, in our context, right, how do we get talent? How do we retain them? I think I'll just build on the key word that you said, which is learning mindset, right? I think if you get the right people, then learning mindset is something that helps you throughout, right? Because in data science, it's so multidimensional, right? And people come from different backgrounds. There are people who bring the domain with them. There are people who bring stats and quant aptitude with them. There are people who bring strong hacking and sort of programming skills with them. They just love programming, right? And there are people who love kind of construct of the algorithms and the models and so on and so forth. There are people who love just the software development, lifecycle management, MLOps and whatnot, right? So it's important to understand what is that person's strength and what are his aspirations, right? As long as your team, which is the way I look at it, my team, can help him map his trajectory, fill those gaps, help him work towards whatever his 2, 3, 4, 5-year goals are, that's it. That allows me to hire right people. That allows me to sustain the motivation levels, make sure that they do a good job, and they're working towards whatever they want to achieve, right? So that's really the key. The learning mindset and then mapping it to what you can, what kind of opportunities you can create for them.
Yeah, I think great point. So again, sort of strongly endorse that whole, almost taking a analytics quantitative view to the careers of these folks, right? Where you're, mapping out their journey, so that as their, mentor and boss, you're showing that I'm looking sort of way far ahead for you, right? And not just what you're going to do for me today. Right?
True.
Sugna, what are your thoughts on this?
So I think given, understanding risk is something, our priority. So mostly we target people from banking who have that, expertise. So I myself came from there. And I think it's the use case. Two things that drives is, keeping up ahead on technology. The more you are ahead, we are in a product kind of a setup, and, we're building solutions for our clients. So that's the pitch, that's something that excites people. And in fact, I mean, to give an example, like we work very heavily on sustainability analytics while the whole world is talking about climate change, net zero goals. So we're actually there building proprietary, climate risk score, doing an impact assessment on infrastructure, how things would change using our own internal, NatCat models. So not just that, plus the hybrid pool of people. So we have climate scientists to, environmental specialists, people who know biodiversity, who are doing double PhDs in that. So I think that kind of a collaborative environment itself, attracts, that's the pitch we have. In fact, one of our, statements that we always say is, do you want to build analytics to push sales and increase consumerism, or build recommender systems for doom scrolling, or do you want to save the world?
Great, great. Raghav, so this entire, supply chain or life cycle of, hiring to, getting them ready to, retaining them, how do, you look at that?
So I think if you look at the college infra of this country, it has sort of failed us to some extent. It is a bit reactive in nature, working 4, 5, 6 years behind schedule. So when we look at talent, we don't hire them on the basis of what they know, but what they can know. And that is I think, the secret sauce that we are trying to define, where if we can identify the output at what we want and then define the input criteria, that I think is going to be the game. So that input criteria definition, that what is that basic input criteria we need to take that person to the desired output that we want, that is the journey we are working on. I think you can tell more in terms of the quant and the analytics piece, the way we correlate it.
Yeah, so, like, Raghav mentioned, there's a fair amount of, analytics and data that we use to build our, talent supply chain, right? So we are, doing things like, looking at their personality profiles, right? So we have some understanding of, for instance, we use the classically used MBTI indicator to see what roles, what kind of personalities work well for a particular kind of role. We are building predictive models where, for instance, you would include their GPA plus the rankings of the colleges that they came from, and see, is there some correlation, patterns, causations there. And just to share some thoughts, right? This, your whole GPA piece is always controversial, right? Some people believe in it, others don't. Based on what we have seen, roughly it contributes 30%, right, to your success, right? Which we define as they being able to get deployed at some of the clients that work with us, right? So a lot of data driven, analytics driven sort of approach to that entire life cycle. Sudarshan, coming back to you, I know we were just chatting that diversity and inclusion is sort of really close to your heart, and of course, what is diversity, what is inclusion, it sort of starts from there. So over to you. You share some of your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great start, right? I mean, because diversity, one of our panelists was saying, it's not about gender, right? It's about thought. So that is a very broad topic. What do I do personally as well as a professional within the organization? To begin with, I lead it from the front. I'm part of the DEA Council. I'm part of all these, actively, visibly lead all these engagements. The other thing is, as an organization, Publicis Sapient is on the forefront in terms of policies that enable people to be what they are, right? The true self. That includes like whether supporting women, returnees to the workforce, or it could be pride, LGBTQI inclusion, or generational diversity. Now, here, interesting anecdote, and I'll, as a parting thought, right? So I have a reverse mentor who is much junior to me. When I first went to that person and I started speaking to her, I thought that she's going to say, my challenge is that I'm not being heard because I'm very junior. It turned out the person's problem was she had people older than her reporting to her, and she was not sure how to go about it, right? She needed mentoring. So many times we assume what a certain problem is, but unless we open up and be open to ideas, we'll never know. So this is what I mean. DEI, it requires organizational and personal effort to make a difference. And I'm happy to say from my team itself, in data, I'll be a bit selfish here. Data, I think, is a space where we can be more meritocratic than other areas. So I think this is a great opportunity to showcase and give opportunities to the people who need it.
RB, you run a big organization.
Yeah. So I think we have been doing very well on the diversity in the last few years, I guess. So I have a couple of thoughts. One is the definition of diversity itself, right? Because in India, we are looking at only gender. Maybe now PWD, veterans, LGBTQ, everything is getting added, but it's not very high yet. But can we not also look at the socio-economic strata, uh, things where people come from, regions where it can be very helpful? So that's one. And our diversity numbers are good. And I get beaten up all the time in most of the reviews. Mostly, if I get 20 minutes in a review with the CEO, maybe they take up almost 10 minutes on diversity, because one of the things which actually I looked at, because when I got beaten up in one of the quarterly business review, I felt like, okay, in spite of doing well, why am I getting beaten up? So one of the things where I started looking maybe for the reports from the industry to see how many people actually from the engineering or the economics or any of the quantitative backgrounds come to the industry. And if I go to any of the colleges, maybe we find lesser women, right? And now it is going up a bit, but still if I go and see if I want to hire a lot of senior people, the percentage of people with experience greater than 15 years is much lesser. So I went back to the panel and said, okay, you know what? I found these answers. But the response I got was quite funny, because they said, you might come back with any of the answers you want, but you need to actually up the game on the diversity. So that's the clear message, and very much focused on it. And we are now having a lot of things going on, not only just from the industry standpoint, but we are looking at from the society standpoint, how we can actually get that diversity going for everybody. So,
Saurabh?
Right. So I think pretty much agree with those points, right? I'll not answer the question how I'm trying to get diversity, etc. I think that's something our HR folks are doing a good job, right? I'll tell you one unintended consequence, or rather benefit of having diversity, not in terms of gender or those things, but in terms of language, right? So we were working on a very interesting project. We call it Voice AI. Essentially, we get millions of calls every month. And since I represent right now I'm talking about the domestic market, where customers make calls to dealerships, right? Asking about price, whether this model is available, or two-wheeler model is available or not, when is the launch, and so on and so forth, right? And you can imagine the kind of country we live in, right? So at least there are, I would say, it takes at least 7 to 8 languages. We need to, if we cover about 8 to 9 languages, then we are covering at least 90% of those calls, right? But still, to cover 90% of those calls, you need to at least have capability to interpret 9 languages, including Hindi, English, all other regional languages, right? And we wanted to build a model, right? So while English is relatively straightforward, when it comes to these vernacular languages, local languages, what do we do, right? And for every small experiment, you can't really go to an agency and get somebody to label the data and so on and so forth, right? We looked at our team, right? Luckily, we had people who could speak at least 4 or 5 languages, right? And those guys volunteered, said, hey, just 1 hour of data labeling, 2 hours of data labeling. I know Tamil, I know Telugu, I know Kannada, and we'll label it, right? So very sort of kind of a anecdotal example, but diversity can actually benefit you in many, many ways, right? And what I just told you was just one sort of unplanned benefit that we enjoyed, because we have people from different parts of the country. Yeah.
Lubna, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I think as an industry, insurance always had that mindset because we're used to underwriting diverse risks. So we don't want concentration, risk concentration. So from that sense, I think diversity as a mindset was always there. And when you talk about talent pool perspective, we've not been very much into chasing numbers. A lot of times people think, I mean, it's not just about, hiring and, meeting the metrics. So we look at, where in the funnel, like RB said, where in the funnel do people drop out? So we realize that upskilling, because especially in analytics, things are so dynamic. 2 years you're, not in a job, or, you're doing something else, you're stagnant, then pretty much, it's very hard to really, pick up. So that's why we have in-house a lot of data literacy programs, which is run not just for our employees, but it's for, we have partnered with some of these, LGBTQ associations, where we try to empower people. So it's not about hiring, but trying to, upskill folks so that I mean, in the long run, we see the results. So that's kind of, been our approach.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, very, very cool way, diversity to, diversify risk. I think I'll remember that, Raghav.
Right. So I think for us, the meritocracy part of it is very critical, the merit part of it. And what we realize is in our overall funnel, the way we look at talent, the way we hire them, if we are more driven by merit, automatically diversity comes there in a proportional way. As RB said, if you look at our college numbers, the number of, and I'm talking about gender diversity particularly, the number of females as opposed to males is very low. So to have a 50-50 at this point in such an industry would be very tough. But if we have a proper merit-based structure, we see that the numbers are proportional to what is there at the back end. That's what we do.
Yeah, and then also, RB sort of mentioned about, the tier 2, tier 3 piece, right? So that is pretty much where we sort of focus, and in a way, with our focus on, tier 2, tier 3, towns, as well as, some of the, colleges there. I mean, it's almost a conscious sort of effort, which is core to our business model, which is out there to help, organizations like yourself, right? So inject that pretty much fresh talent into the ecosystem of a, a Bangalore or a Gurgaon or a Pune, right? So it's almost like at the heart of our, business model. So, we are almost getting close to when we need to wrap up, and I don't think any discussion today can end without talking about, generative AI, chat GPT, and et al. So Darshan, this whole, Gen AI boom, what does it mean for talent? Is it good, bad, ugly? What do you think about it?
Of course, I have to say it's good. Otherwise, I think I'll get beaten up. But that said, PS as an organization, Publicis Sapient, we had a partnership with OpenAI in 2022 before all this became hip and cool, right? But right now, what we are doing is we created a sandbox or a safe space within our organization for people to play around. And we are telling folks that if whatever you are doing, like generating a boilerplate code that you are writing, is going to be written in 5 minutes for you, what are you going to do, right? And letting the people figure it out for themselves, as opposed to we telling them what is the risk for their job is. So that is turning out to be an exciting thing. Now they are telling us how they can be relevant, rather than we trying to convince them why they should be relevant. So that's working out well.
So you're a supporter for,
I'm a
big supporter.
I'm supporter of anything in technology, honestly, but yeah, in this case, it's yet to be proven.
Great. RB?
So in a regulatory industry, right? So we are still in the experimentation phase. Maybe we are like very slow. Most of the times we look at some things which can add the unconscious bias in decision making. So that's one big area where any model built which cannot be explained or implemented has to be looked at very closely. So I think a lot of proof of concepts happening across. Still early stages, I would say. Maybe wait for a couple of years and see how we can actually start implementing some of these at this point in time, but very far from there.
Saurabh?
Yeah, I think since you asked whether I'm for it, against it, I think there's no question of being for or against, right? Because you can't go against the wave or the tide. The idea is how do we harness it, right? The question is how do we harness it? And I've already seen some applications of it already in my organization. And give you again a small anecdote, right? About a year back, we had asked for some integration between two systems, right? And went with that request to our digital engineering colleagues that, hey, this is system A, system B, I need to somehow integrate them. They're, okay, we haven't done, the response was we haven't done it in the past. It will take us some time to figure out, what the APIs are, what the contracts are, etc. And we'll figure out how to do it, right? Give us some time, right? And it's standard for these things to take few days, probably few weeks, right? Now, in today's world, right, if I have the same question, and if they say that they need some time to figure it out, someone who doesn't understand even APIs and integration can extract the code and tell them, hey, here it is. This is what is needed to integrate those two systems, because ChatGPT is spitting it out for you, right? So that's how I see the power of, this is just one example, but the same thing can be applied across each and every role in the company, right? Whether it's an accountant, whether it is the marketing guy, right? Look at the speed at which they create content today, right? It takes 3 weeks, 4 weeks to work with agencies to get the marketing content out, right? And now you look at the power of how at what pace you can create those banners, ads, etc., etc. So I'm really for it and rooting for it, so that net it creates a lot of wins in the system.
Yes, so I think I'll split it two parts. So one is, again, being a regulated industry, right? So I think initially to begin with, we are looking at only, low-hanging fruits like productivity gains. So how do we simply, if, it can help with data cleaning, data labeling, and or validating something from external sources, or summarizing. Our policy documents are like 200 pages or in different languages, so how do we get a summary out of it? So these are some of the we're looking at it that at short term. And long term, I mean, we are quite optimistic that it would be more consumed in the form of assistants, like a sales assistant, there would be a claims assistant, there would be an underwriting assistant attached to every single role that currently exists in the organization, to bring efficiencies.
So, Raghav, final thoughts. We know we are super bullish on it. Just talk us
Yeah.
through that.
So I think as tools become more efficient, we need to figure out how can we solve more complex problems. And that's where the logic part starts kicking in, the contextual part, the domain part starts kicking in. So I think as a talent, we need to figure out how can we solve more complex problems, because it is becoming way more easier to solve the problems we were solving 5 or 6 years ago.
So yeah, great. I think time's up, big, red and white time. So yeah, thank you, panelists, for this sort of, super insightful discussion. I know I have learned a lot. So happy to take any questions from the audience.